To the latest episode of Harmonious World. I'm Hilary Seabrook, and for this episode I'm joined by Timo Vollbrecht. Timo is a sax player, a composer, band leader and scholar, and his band Fly Magic has released their third album, Givers and Takers. What you're listening to right now is Happy Happy from Givers and Takers. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Timo. Welcome, Timo.
Thank you very much for having me, Hilary.
So, your latest album is Givers and Takers.
Mm-hmm.
With your, there's a quartet, isn't it? Fly Magic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a quartet.
Right. So tell me a little bit about Fly Magic and about how Givers and Takers came about, because there's bits of it that are very lockdown, aren't they?
Yes. So Fly Magic has existed for quite a while. I'm originally from Germany and I came to the US in 2010. So, wow, it's been 12 years already. So once I arrived in New York, because, I, as a jazz musician, which is my proper training, although I'm very cross-genre these days, I mean, New York was and it still is such a magnet. So I really wanted to go to New York and learn, from the greats and be in a really cool community in a very interesting and creative scene. So that was the big pull. So I came to New York, and at some point I wanted to form my own band. And this is in, let's say 2011, 2012. And I accrued people that I really wanted to play with, and we started working on music together. And our first tour was actually a Central American tour in 2013. We played at the Jazz Festival in Haiti and in Panama and the Dominican Republic. And that really kicked off this band. The personnel was a little different, but the big constant was the guitar player and I, the guitar player Keisuke Matsuno, who I've had a very, very close artistic relationship with, and he's such a sound artist on the guitar. So it really geared me toward a direction where I'm very aware of sonic possibilities, mixing acoustic and electronic timbres, and really exploring that whole area. So over the years, that was really my path. I was looking for new possibilities in terms of composition, songwriting, and was also through touring. Was always had the lineup changed and morphed into new shapes and forms. We did 2 records, and then once the pandemic hit, inevitably I had a lot of time on my hands and started writing again, really gearing up for a new record. So most of this music was written during that time. It does not necessarily always have a thematic relationship to the pandemic, and we're happy things are moving along these days. But what was very inspiring to me was the topic of community, because that was something that became so apparent and so obvious to me how important the communal aspect of making music is. And that was really during the lockdowns, where we did not have the chance to play with many people. And first I was like, oh, I'm excited, I have so much time to practice, but then I very quickly realized that coming together, making music with and for people is really what it's all about. And in music school, you learn about harmony, melody, technique, which is all great. You have to. But the fact that this really is a sort of praxis, it's not really taught so much. And it really is the backbone of making music, I think. So that's kind of what the title Givers and Takers also points at, the giving and taking and human interactivity. And I put a band together for this that really consists of my closest friends. and and what it enables is a lot of trust. So there's no or very little ego involved in this record. Everyone's very on on the same page. So there is soloing, but you'll see there's no real dominance of like one person against the other.
Right. And that certainly comes across. And although you're the leader of the band, and some of the tracks start with you, and they sort of almost grow out of it, there is that sense of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Which comes
I'm glad
very clearly.
I'm glad to hear that. Yes, that's really the idea.
yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, it's difficult to put it in a subgenre of jazz. It's at times it's free, and at times it seems more structured and more which I love. I love the fact that I'm not going to put you in a box.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, we all listen to so many different musics, and I'm a saxophone player. Right. I'm the director of jazz studies, so a lot of people want to put me in this jazz box, and gladly, I love jazz, but we all listen to all these kinds of musics that we put together really and mix it, and I really see myself really as a songwriter. I don't. It's weird because it's without lyrics. It's instrumental songwriting, but all of our tunes have a song structure. And the more I progress as a composer, the more I also embrace the idea of melody and harmonic simplicity, while kind of extending the boundaries of maybe sonorities and timbre, if you will.
Yeah.
And then one other thing, as a saxophone player, I always feel there are two ways of, I mean, there are more than two, but there are two big ways of playing saxophone in a band. You either fly above the band or you integrate yourself within the band. And I've always been somebody who loved the latter.
What I find very interesting is the fact that I'm currently starting a new musical project. I'm a sax player, predominantly baritone sax.
Oh, sweet. Amazing.
Yeah. So I'm starting a new project at the moment with a good friend of mine who's a trumpeter.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that sort of interweaving thing really nicely, and it just feels really good. It's not like, well, I'm the sax player, this was my idea, so I'm gonna I'm gonna do this over here and you do whatever you like over there, or you come in when I tell you, or whatever it is.
Right.
And it's so nice, isn't it, to be able to do that?
Yeah, also I think it has a little bit to do with range. I mean, you mentioned you play bari, so you have a low range on your instrument. As a tenor player, we're really in the middle, range-wise. So if you play soprano, it's different. You're automatically on the top, in terms of register and sound. So I think especially like kind of like the low end is where you can really interweave with other instruments.
It's amazing. It's so liberating. It's lovely. It's really good. I'm gonna start this podcast with Happy Happy.
Oh, fantastic.
Which I think is exactly what you said. It's a song without any lyrics, but you can always interpose your own lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you compose that?
Maybe a year ago. No, a year and a half ago, maybe.
Right.
The reason behind it is I have this big affinity for melancholy, so I'm always drawn to these like kind of more warm and kind of minor chords, and I used to listen to Radiohead a lot, and I'm really into that, and I kind of made an effort to. I told myself, Timo, you have to write a happy song. Like all of your songs have this kind of like melancholy, like a tinge of it, So that was my approach, and so it's a little humorous, the song on the one hand. It does take kind of a dark turn at some point because all these electronic things can't come in, and they're like these destructive elements, and then it kind of makes its way out of that again. But the starting point was really about my thought of, okay, let's write a really chipper song. Why not?
Well, absolutely. And sometimes I think as a musician, you need to give yourself a brief.
Yes, absolutely.
That you can then adhere to. It's a good discipline, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You want to explore new ways of doing things, new paths.
Absolutely. Right. So in the middle of the podcast, I want to play an extract from Pow, because you wrote that for your son, is that correct?
Yeah, I have a 9-month-old at this point, and I wrote it before he was born, so it was more like an expectation of that. And it's this very kind of tender, warm song. With that, I was definitely inspired by this the expectancy of fatherhood and parenthood.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing like it, is there?
Yeah, well, little did I know how active he is. It would have maybe changed the vibe of the
Right. Okay.
tune.
Because by now, 9 months in, yeah,
Yeah,
they have their own personality and they're on the move, and yeah,
yeah, exactly.
fantastic. So I decided to play you the end of Pow. I hope you enjoyed listening to that. Now back to our conversation. Right. And I am going to finish with the first movement of Art is Live, Solidarity. So tell me about that, because the three movements of that is very much written around the idea of that lockdown and the pandemic. So
Right.
did you write it during the lockdown?
Yeah, I did write it during the lockdown, and I wrote it in 2020. What happened was the when the pandemic hit and the first lockdown started, um, I have two friends here in Brooklyn, Marta Sanchez and Caroline Davis. They were really quick at setting up a concert series in support of our community. It was an online series, and a few months later, a lot of people were doing it. But this was really early, and it really made it apparent how much solidarity there is within the Brooklyn music community and other music communities as well. And it was something that I thought was really inspiring. They had invited me to do a solo set there, which I did. I saw a lot of my colleagues and friends who were doing things there. So that was something that I thought was really cool. And the three movements all relate to some of the experiences that we, or at least I, had during that time. One was this feeling of solidarity juxtaposed with the second movement, which is called solitude, which was, being alone and like confined in your own four walls for a long period of time. And the third is called agency, which at the same time, in 2020, the summer of 2020, New York had a roaring Black Lives Matter movement. So there was so much of that happening as well, right in front of our door, and it's a tribute to that, and also to the idea of art and music being or having the potential of being a force for change, or at least accompanying it. So those three experiences are kind of in there.
Looking back on it now, it kind of seems unreal that we went through that. I can remember I can't remember which artist it was very early on in this podcast, and I was talking to somebody from New York, and at that point, New York had decided that it was just going to shut down. It wasn't going to even try and do anything until the start of 2021. And it was just, everybody had made that decision. All the theatres were closed, all the venues were closed. That was it. Whereas in London, it was very much a kind of, well, we're closed for the moment, but we'll see where we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can remember talking to whoever this was. I can't remember which of my guests it was, and saying that seems an awfully long time to have 9-10 months of no live music. Seems really hard. Whereas in London, we're looking at opening things up as much as we can. And now looking back on it, you think, well, it went on a lot longer than that.
Yeah. I was on my way when the travel ban between Europe and the US was announced. I was on my way to Europe for a tour. I was on the plane, immediately turned around when I touched down. But
right.
I did have this idea. It's like, oh, it's a month. I might just spend it in Europe and then come back. But little did we know. But the just maybe one thing to add, the record was recorded toward the end of our first tour after this. So the vibe that we had, at least within the band, was really this, oh man, we're on the road again. After such a long time of being locked down, a lot of the pieces, we rehearsed very little, almost not, I think once we did rehearse. Wow. We really developed this music on the road. So each night it sounded completely different. And the audience actually has a big part in the shape of these tunes, because you make music for people and you feel the vibe and you talk to them afterwards. So it was in a way the audience was part of the shaping of this musical material in a way. So and we were just so happy about being able to play again. So I hope that is conveyed on the record, because that was really what we were feeling at that time.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a lot of marking those moments in time. And I think that, especially that the three movements of art is live, solidarity, solitude, and then agency. I think those three words are the words that I'd like to remember from the lockdown, because there was a sense of solidarity, but there was also that solitude.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that Black Lives Matter came at the same time, came out of the pandemic, I think was really quite spectacular, because I think it allowed people time to really think about how dreadful the situation was that many people had experienced in terms of brutality because of the color of their skin, whoever it was from, whoever that brutality, wherever that brutality came from. Right. And the fact that we all suddenly had a bit of time, we couldn't think about other things because there was nothing else to do. I think that's it's quite an interesting.
True.
Anyway, so what does the future hold?
What does the future hold? Well, you tell me. I don't know. But aside from not knowing, there are a lot of plans in the works. We are being on tour. We're going on tour in late April, early May in Europe. We have some gigs coming up in the States as well. We're playing January 20th. We're playing at the Owl Music Parlor in Brooklyn. There's some other things that are being booked right now. But the thing that I'm looking forward to is our tour in Europe in late April, early May.
Brilliant. Are you coming to London?
I hope so. We're still booking it. We do have a gig in Belfast, so it's not so far. So let's see.
It's not that far. It's a very short plane ride.
So exactly.
Very short. Yeah. Well, if that's the closest, I think that might be a trip to Belfast, because I'd love to see this quartet live. It really would.
Yeah,
is it
please come.
Is it going to be the same musicians as on the album?
Same musicians, same lineup. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So one thing that's interesting and it was a conscious decision was to play without a bassist. We have a keyboard player who's playing, his left hand is playing synthesizer bass, and his right hand is operating piano and keys.
Right.
So that's something that is just was super fun to experiment with.
Yeah. And actually, I used to play in a pop band that for a while didn't have a bass player had used a bass synth, certainly in recordings, and I think it is quite an interesting concept. It's very different. If you think about bass synth, you think about bass guitar, and you think about string bass, double bass. They're all so different. Yeah, and they give such a different vibe. And then I don't think this album is the first thing you think is, oh, there's no bass player.
True. So, yeah, and even the first piece actually doesn't have bass. The first piece is just a piano, the piece "Pow," and I don't think you miss it. It's so airy. So it's yeah,
exactly. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me, Timo. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Absolutely. Likewise. Let's be in touch. I hope to see you. Well, I hope we'll come to London, but if not, maybe Belfast.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Timo Vollbrecht. So this is Givers and Takers, and this is the first movement of Art is Live. This is Solidarity, which Timo and I discussed. Thank you for joining me once more on Harmonious World, and please do share what you're good at. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.